go. In a vast wasteland of entertainment where radio has become obsolete, stands an embittered man teetering at the edge of sanity. With help from radio friends, he's about to embark on a global mission that would change the course of history as we know it. Broadcasting live from the secret studios on the banks of the Brandywine River in Delaware is Mitchell K.C. Hill. And up to the Great White North in Vancouver is Alexander Knight.
Well, hey, welcome. Good to have you here. This is show number 58 on The Last Angry DJ. My name is Mitchell K.C. Hill. I'm the old radio guy that talks about how it used to be back in the old days, and we go all the way up to current times where we talk to current technologists like my good friend and co-host, Mr. Alexander Knight. Alex, you there?
I am certainly all the way up here in just outside of Vancouver in British Columbia, Canada. It's good to be here, Mitch, for episode 58 of The Last Angry DJ. There's a lot to talk about. We're going to try to squeeze in as much information as possible, but I just want to thank everybody who's in the live chat for being here today. And of course, I'm going to welcome Mark Giuliani, who is our part of our show, a big part of our show. And I always appreciate your perspective, Mark, as a radio station owner. So thanks for being here and helping out.
Well, thank you, Alex. And I'd like to play more of a role, but I need people to ask questions so I can read them. So everyone, bring your questions up so we can read them and try and answer them. Mitch?
I got a question for you, Mark, since you're there. Thank you. Has the tariffs already struck Australia? Because I noticed the prices on Blackmagic gear has precipitously increased in just one night. Like yesterday, it was this price, and now it's this price. We'll talk about that a little bit later on the show, but I just want to know if you know that actually happened.
They did happen. They have kicked in, right. And we have some really interesting observations about them.
All right, we're going to talk about that. That's the fun part of doing the show. So that's what's coming up. We're going to do a little rundown of what's going on at NAB. We're going to hit the high points because there is so much to cover at NAB. And as Mark said, if you have a question or a comment about something you saw that's just being released at NAB, feel free to jump in and put it in YouTube. Or how do they do it in Mukana or Discord? Alex, you always have that answer right on the top of your head.
Yeah, absolutely, Mitch. So they can do that by joining our Discord community. That's our best place to go for our communication during the show, after the show as well. So if you scan that little QR code you're seeing above my my left shoulder here, that will let you into our community. If you're already there, you should say something. You should say hi. It's very, very quiet in there. We're trying to get more people in there. So we're looking forward to seeing more people there.
It's a quiet room, is what we're saying. So we'd love to have your comments and questions. We're going to talk about all kinds of fun stuff today. We have quite a large agenda. It's the, we'll call it the Broadcast Boffins edition of the show. The Boffins include myself, Alex, and Mark. And we cover just about everything in the broadcasting and podcasting industry all at the same time. It's a wonderful thing. One of the interesting things before we get the show started, Mark called me up and started showing me some chat GPT images that he started firing at me left and right. And I fell on the floor and started laughing. And we put it on our tees, we call it a keyframe, for this edition of The Last Angry DJ. Mark, what were you doing spending around time with chat GPT? And kind of give us a rundown of how you got there, because I think it's hilarious.
Well, you know, being the owner of a radio station, I have a reputation to maintain. And every once in a while on this show, Mitch will say something so, I don't even know how to describe it, but he would get this look like from me. And so we started to, make fun of my looks. And I started to wonder, how could we create a look that we could always pop up at the right time?
I know time for cranks like you.
Yeah, exactly. So, let me walk you through some of the things I did. First of all, I don't know if you all can see that now.
Oh, yeah.
You ready for me to talk? All right. So,
It's your patent.
Yeah. So, at the radio station, we had a photographer come in and take images of all of us. And one of them was me pointing like Uncle Sam. So I started out with that. I showed them this behind the scenes last week, and everybody thought it was hysterical. So I said, well, let's make it patriotic. And then I said, well, let's make it patriotic with Pixar's version. And then
You
I
look like
said,
Lou Grant in that picture.
so I started just slowly prompting ChatGPT into what was going on. And I said, well, have a radio station owner played by me be very upset at one of the announcers. And so it drew this picture. And then I said, well, here's Mitch. He's the announcer. And so it then made this picture. And I laughed so hard, I sent it to Mitch. And Mitch said, but my teeth are awful. And I said, okay, fix Mitch's teeth. So it made Mitch smile. So then I said, well, wait a minute, we got to bring Alex in. So I said, here's a picture of Alex. And so then it brought Alex in, but it brought like a whole bunch of Alexes in.
Alex has
Even
got a
little
Muppet.
Alex is over here. So then I said, wait a minute, there's only one Alex. So then but it didn't give Alex a microphone. So I said, well, I have to tell it that Alex is part of the show and needs a microphone. And it still didn't do anything. So then I said, wait a minute, Alex does have a microphone.
Wait. Before you go anywhere, look at the expression on Alex's face. Is that the
One
expression
of
of somebody
shock and
that feels
horror.
It's like something's gone off the rails and he's like, oh my God, what am I doing?
So then
here?
it gave Alex a microphone, but it took Mitch's away. Now I kind of
Hey.
like that, but that was part
Nice.
of the punishment.
Nice.
So then I had to say, wait a minute, everybody has a microphone. So then I said, have me coming through a door, have everybody has a microphone, and Alex is running an audio board, but it forgot to put the cables in the audio board. So we went through a couple iterations
Minor
of
detail.
that. And then it went through and I kept telling it. And then I said, Mel, make
There's
it
the
a
one.
cartoon. And then we went through a couple iterations with the no microphone and where are the microphone cables and all that. And then finally it gets it right, but it leaves the keyboard off the laptop. So I said, wait a minute, you can't have a laptop without a keyboard.
Details.
Right.
So
then we
what's
settled
happening?
on this. And
So what's happening here is that you are writing prompts for ChatGPT. That's
I'm
all you're
writing the
doing. You're not an artist.
right. I'm not a graphics artist. I'm an architect, but that's even makes me even further from a graphic artist. And so we, so Mitch and I kept going back and forth with some of these, and he said, let's go with this one. Let's make it, a landscape mode, 16 by 9, 1920 by 1080, whatever. So we did, and this became what we showed up on but what's interesting about it is that you never seem to get the person never seems to look the same, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, because it's
So
randomly generated.
it's randomly generating from the verbiage. It doesn't really understand what the person it's created looks like.
Yeah. So here's my takeaway on ChatGPT and what you're doing there is that, first of all, you don't have to be an artist, but you have to be good with prompting. And I think that points to the future is that in order to engage with AI in anything, whether it's writing code or doing cartoons or crazy stuff like this, you have to be good at prompting, which means you're kind of like an art director or a creative director, which I feel everybody feels that they're that. So if you can describe what you want it to do, it's going to do a pretty good job, and maybe there'll be a few surprises in there. So if you're a broadcaster and you don't have the money to go out to a real artist to do some promotions for the show, whatever, you just hit a button and then you get this. And this is, to me, this is absolutely hilarious. If you had to go through traditional means to have an artist come up with that, it would cost thousands of dollars to be able to make that happen. So that's the beauty of, I'm sorry, I made black there. That's the beauty of what Mark was doing is he was giving prompts to it. So anybody can make it happen. I mean, I'm not a big fan of ChatGPT, but you know what? Even if you don't want to use it, you're using it. If you do any Google announcements or anything you want to do, there you go. So that's kind of. Go ahead, Alex.
I love how stunned I look in that photo.
That is the winner.
Well, that was
not far from
part
the
of my
truth.
prompt was have Alex be horrified of what just came out of Mitch's mouth. But it's interesting.
Absolutely.
I will sometimes use ChatGPT to write the prompts that I take to Midjourney.
Oh,
Just
no,
so
that's
it can
interesting.
condense them and make them more, direct.
That's perfect.
Let's keep it moving.
Okay.
I'm starting to lose my buzz over here.
All right. So I don't know if you guys heard that, but for some reason
I heard that.
I'm pushing.
It's loud.
It was loud. Good. That means you heard it. So anyhow, there are other things to talk about. Other people are sitting on the side of their chairs. Alex, what's our first prompt prompt? What's our first talking point here?
Our first
is it about
talking
NAB
point today
or
is
broadcast?
we're going to be talking about the AM in Every Car Act, which I believe is specific to the United States, but I think some of you guys, since you have so many years in radio, probably have something to say. I have my own opinions about this, but why don't we
give
start
them
off
to us.
with you?
Why don't you start off? You're there.
It's probably weird coming out of my mouth as someone, I'm in my early 40s. I did grow up with radio. A lot of people now that are in their 20s probably not listening to the radio at all. But I think, although I don't use the radio that often other than just listening to traffic reports, I still think that radio has a place, especially AM radio. I really do think that it is important for emergencies. I think I still think a lot of people rely on it for traffic and news. And that's the proof is in the numbers as well. So I think taking it away, especially in areas where, just outside of I know we're talking about cars, having it in every car, but I just don't think getting rid of radio or getting rid of AM radio specifically, especially in underserved areas where maybe they don't have broadband internet. I don't think internet radio is the answer here. I think keeping it as is the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think Mark would argue that there's a place for AM radio because even if you don't have a car, because there's a lot of people out there, especially in third world or Appalachian parts of the world. Sorry, I just insulted an entire area of the country. May not have a car, and they need their little wind-up radio, AM radio, or transistor radio to be able to find out what's going on. Mark, what's your take on the use of AM radio for emergency things like that? Because I think that's a realistic use of it. And why does the government have to be involved?
Well, the government's involved because the FCC regulates the radio station licenses. But the importance of having AM involved in it is that it's the most, it's the easiest way to get a message across to the entire population. You only need 75 radio stations to reach the entire country when they're on the AM band. And so that's why for years, AM radio has been set up to do, civil emergency announcements. And yes, we live in a digital age, but all it's going to take is, even locally in a local response, all it takes is one car wreck taking out a pole, and now people don't have the internet to get their digital information from.
Sure.
So with the AM, at least it's not dependent on a lot of that infrastructure. And most of these AM stations that are part of the emergency broadcast system have redundant power. So they're running a generator when the power goes out, and they're able to still transmit those messages out to the public.
And the other point is that just because they forced the AM radio back into cars, which it looks like they're going to do, what does Ford do? For example, Ford just announced no more AM radio. If they pass this legislation, and it's already gone through the Senate and it's handed over to the House, if they pass it, what is Ford going to do? A recall? And they're going to push a button and everybody has AM radio, poof, like that? It's going to happen that way. The other thing is that the government is going to force you to use it. If you don't like listening to AM in your car, you might be using an app. On a digitally served thing. You may be listening to TuneIn Radio or iHeart or whatever special apps. I know, Mark, you have special apps for that. Can you listen to those apps in your car?
You can, but so let's just say, for instance, I'm in DC and I want to listen to the station in Rehoboth. It's too far away for me to do that. If I play the app, now my data bill goes through the roof. So you have to then spend money to listen to the radio, which isn't the way it was intended. So yes, you can do it. And yes, we've all been, I remember September 11th, looking down at my cell phone, getting, a message that just said, this phone has been taken over by the government. So,
Wow.
So we think we have all this power with these digital devices, but the federal government's going to come in and take those spectrums over for the emergency use they need. to defend the country.
So
And
our points here that we're discussing are somewhat irrelevant because the government's going to do what the government's going to do. And the following thing is that if they pass it in the AM radios and now in all the cars, and let's say magically they were able to clean up the interference problems that they have that go along with it, which they'll never get rid of, people are going to decide. The consumer will decide whether or not they're going to listen to AM radio or not. And the question is, I think ultimately the consumer, you folks out there watching and listening, are going to be the arbiters of whether or not you want to use it. Not everybody's going to do it. So it'll just be another access point. But I agree with the simplicity of it. It's always been there. It's simple. Everybody has an AM radio somewhere. So if it's about getting information out there in an emergency situation, it may be the place to go. So
I'm
it's
not
going to
so
get
sure.
passed.
Yeah, and I'm not so sure Ford already moved to take the AMs out because I know they announced that in like 2016 or 2017. They got a lot of pushback and they decided to keep them in for the time being. So I'm not so sure that they're sending cars out of the factories without AM right now.
Sure. And Elon Musk, they just slap him on the wrist and say, hey, get those AMs back in your Teslas, and off we go. So it's going to happen sooner or later. I don't think it's going to save AM. I really honestly don't think so. I think it's going to be a challenge to run an AM station, whether it's available in all cars. There are a lot of older cars out there still driving the roads. My car's got an AM radio in it, and the car before that had AM, and et cetera, et cetera. I remember a time when there was only AM, no FM, and that was an issue. They used to make these little gadgets you had to put into your AM radio that would transcode the signal and allow you to receive an FM signal if your car didn't have it. And it's always going to be something, But the internet is fragile. I think you said that on last week's show. It is. It's fragile. And it's ironic that DARPA just created the internet to be rock solid, even in a nuclear exchange with another country. And yet, when there's a big lightning storm in the area, or we get a lot of rain, or as you say, a car crashes into a telephone pole, poof, the internet is gone. So we've all suffered from that. So we'll see. We'll keep an eye on things, but it looks like the government is being forced to make a decision. They're going to do what they do, and then they're going to say, well, we just revitalized AM. It's going to be as popular now as it was in the 60s. I don't think so. I think they're going to make their own decisions, and that's the way it's going to go. Alex, what else is happening out there in the world of broadcasting and NAB?
Well, you just said it, Mitch. NAB 2025 is the big thing that's going on right now in Las Vegas, and this is going to take a good chunk of time in this episode. But there are lots of product announcements. We won't be able to cover it all. We're going to choose to really focus on Blackmagic because that's kind of a point of interest for a lot of us, you and I, people that listen to this show. They announced a whole bunch of new hardware, updates to their cloud infrastructure, updates to DaVinci Resolve 20, which is now in beta, and you can download that to start testing it. So there's a lot of new stuff. For me, for my world, the one thing that really stood out to me is, and what's a lot of people are talking right now about, is the ATEM Mini Extreme ISO. And Mitch, Mark has got a screenshot of that. I'm just going to put it on the screen there. So they announced a brand new high-end switcher from the ATEM Mini line. And basically, this one is HDMI. There may be an SDI version coming. We don't know. But it is a complete redesign. You can see it has fewer buttons. And the buttons that it does have, it looks like they are much higher quality buttons. They lifted the switcher buttons from their higher-end studio panels. So they're not going to, hopefully the days of the mushy, rubbery buttons are gone. They have balanced audio jacks as well. Yes. If you look at the back of that panel. So it is a bit thicker, but you will see on the back panel they have two balanced analog Neutrik jacks on there. So they've got the locking tab. So they will take both XLR and quarter-inch. Hopefully the preamps are from their cameras
dizzy.
Or some of their better preamps. So that was what really stood out to me. Mark, do you have a better screenshot of just the panel is really all we need to? I don't know if they've updated the website.
You have to go to the product shot, And why don't you and I
anyways,
talk, Alex, while he's doing that?
The back of the panel basically has got. I think I can cut to a screenshot here. I've got something here on my end here. Just a second.
And while you're doing that, let me tell you what I like about the new G2 right off the get-go. I like the new buttons because the buttons on the old A10, the problem with it is that they are rubbery and they don't always make contact or they bounce. And well, there's some nice meters. There it is. There's a cool shot.
So that's the top of the panel that we're looking at basically. And if we go
see those cool buttons on there, those are broadcast TV type buttons that's on their higher end TV consoles. So
yeah, and they've got rotary encoders as well. And then they've added not quite a T-bar, Mitch. I know how much you love your T-bar.
Yes.
They added a little plastic fader. The other interesting thing, because I know this was a complaint from a lot of users, the constant accidental hitting the fade to black button. Now they did update the ATEM software so that you can lock it out, but it might be hard to see in this image here, but they've added these little plastic guards on the left and right side so that your finger doesn't accidentally land on this button and mash that. So that's the top panel. If we look at the back, do I have a photo of? Yeah, here we go.
Keep scrolling down. It shows there it is.
You can see the back panel here. So those are your two preamps, XLR 1/4-inch jacks. They'll take line level or mic level. It looks like they also have a proper 1/4-inch headphone jack as well. You got 8 HDMI inputs. What's new here, though, is you have an additional third output, which can be assignable via the software, which is nice. So that means you could have one on program, one on your multi-view, and then maybe a third could be the new Fairlight audio console, which you could have up on a dedicated monitor. They've also redesigned the software, so it has a new Fairlight audio processor inside with a whole new interface, which I can't really show here, but they showcased it in the live stream, and their new Fairlight console or the mixer software now has a loudness meter that they basically took from DaVinci Resolve and they put it in there. CF Express Type B. I'm excited about this because we all know anyone who's used an ATEM, the ISO recording functionality sometimes can be a bit unstable. And I'm hoping that now being able to record to CF Express, which is a more professional format, a medium for recording video, I'm hoping that this will be a little bit more reliable. You can still record to external SSDs via the USB ports. You still have the two USBs. They added this additional Thunderbolt port, and I'm blanking now on, it has some special functionality to do with keying, and I can't for the life of me remember what exactly it is. Maybe somebody in the chat.
It's a asynchronous video connection to your computer, so you can do stuff in software. And also you can use DaVinci replay and things like that. The software is integrated into the operation of this
right. And we have
ATEM.
And also on the note of recording, tied specifically because they put this high-speed CF Express slot in, it's got two network ports. So one of them is the standard 1G, but then they added a much faster 10 gigabit Ethernet port. So that way you can directly connect to this and transfer files and edit them, and it'll be much, much faster than that 1G. Also, I forgot to mention this because we were talking about audio. This surprised me. The fact that they put a MADI audio input on here. You can feed this 32 channels
16
of audio. I think
16
it's 32
channels. No, it's 16. I'll arm wrestle you for that.
Pretty sure it was 32.
Yeah, it's 16 channels of MADI.
That's basically, whoops, cut to the wrong camera there. Sorry, guys. Back to me there. But yeah, that's basically it. Obviously, it has a new cooling system. It's thicker. And that's the new ATEM Extreme ISO G2. Question is, is it worth buying? Cool. Is it worth upgrading to? That's the question.
One of the things that's funny is I looked at the pricing on it yesterday. It was like $19.95, and today the price went up another $200 because of the tariffs going on. So tariffs are now affecting just about everything, and it's like, well, you know, if you really like it, the $200 isn't that bad, but you're basically paying a tax hike that goes into the pocket of the U.S. government, not into your pocket. And I'm sure the Aussies were not happy about increasing the price, but they got to follow the rules, and those are the rules. So if you're going to buy any of this stuff, try to find places that have whether it's coming from Canada or Australia or Germany or China or Japan, it's going to have a 15% across the board tariff on it. Mark, you're our political liaison here. What's with the tariff amount? Is it constant across everything? Just say I don't know if you don't know.
No, sorry, I was having a mute issue. I don't really know because it was interesting before the show. Told you just to go buy it from Alex, and in Canada they won't have the tariff, and he said nope, same price here too. So the manufacturers are jumping for joy because now they've just been able to increase their price around the world for the amount of the tariff.
Yeah, but they don't get that money. That's the tariff does not go into their pocket. It goes into the
No. But they're charging as if there was a tariff to all those people in Canada. So they're pocketing
Okay.
that money.
And here I thought I could buy it from Alex here on the show and get the discount. And it's going to hit me with a tariff coming and going. So, by the way, that's just a thing. I don't know how long it's going to last, but it's there for now. So enjoy the tariffs for what they're worth. They're taxes. I don't care what everybody else calls it. It's a tax. So what you're going to do. So there's other stuff. First of all, what do you do with your old ATEM Mini Extreme? I noticed a lot of people put them up on eBay prior to NAB. This is the typical cycle that we see, that the word leaks out that something is coming down the pipeline, so people want to jettison their older version. I'm not like it's not like an Apple iPhone that I'm going to camp out in front of the Blackmagic store for a week on end and wait for the new release. I mean, I'll say, yeah, that's nice. I like the XLRs on it. I like the new buttons. I like the new capability to work with DaVinci. I don't like using DaVinci, but all those things. As the instant replay, you can play a larger media pool. You can stream special effects in it. And all that's really cool. And that's a natural progression of a device that's become a workhorse standard to just about all of us, whether you're a radio station. Mark, you use these things, the older ATEMs and the G1 in
We
your
use a lot of
studios,
them.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
so
we use a
now
lot.
maybe you'll step out and get a new one, and you'll
I
marvel
don't
at the brilliance of it.
I don't think so. I mean, there's two schools of thought here. One school of thought is buy it when you need it. The other school of thought is, well, buy it before you need it so you know how to use it when you do need it. But right now, for what we're doing, we probably have 6 or 7 ATEMs, most of them the minis, but we have a Constellation. And they're all working and doing what they need to do for our purpose. So there's no need for us to go run out and buy this.
So the new Constellation they just announced, it's like a 50 input Constellation that also has a hub in it, so you don't really need to buy a router for your video. Everything can run to this little rack-mounted Constellation version of the ATEM, and it's got like a billion. It's not even that. It's like more like this. It's got a billion SDI connections on the back of it, which means everything can have a Gazinta and a Gazalta, and that would probably appeal to you in your larger plan to take over the world. But I'm with you. I mean, let's be practical. The other thing is that when you make a purchase, if you're a smart businessman, there's a return on investment, or ROI, I guess that's what it's called. And you need to see if you've gotten your money back. So if you haven't gotten your money back yet from your old ATEM, you're doing okay, because there's going to be another one, and there's going to be another one after that, and another one after that. So we salute Blackmagic for finally taking a device that hasn't had any major changes to it in years and finally doing that. And then there's other related stuff to the A10. There's other mini volume versions, excuse me, I meant to say, of the ATEM they've improved. And they got a nifty little Bluetooth battery-powered remote control that will control any ATEM that's been out for a while. It used to be
Control
600.
panel,
Yeah, it used to be like $600. I haven't checked the latest price on it, but it was a reasonably priced remote for it. I don't know if I trust anything that ran on batteries or
Bluetooth for that matter.
That was wireless or Bluetooth. And especially if you have a production where you got a client that depends on you to do things in a professional way and have 3.9 service. So, Alex, what's your opinion on that?
I just wanted to say a few additional things about the ATEM, because one of the, part of me wants to say, yes, this is the ATEM I've been waiting for. I need to upgrade immediately. But what I really want to see, and I'm going to wait for the reviews and for people to actually test it, is there's a couple of things. So I want to know if Blackmagic has redesigned the networking stack and made the live streaming component of the switcher more reliable, because that was one of the reasons why I stopped using the ATEM for live streaming, was because one, you don't have fine control over the live streaming settings. And what I mean by that is, for example, like the ATEM minis right now, they're designed to do variable bit rate, and YouTube prefers if you have constant bit rate, and there's no control over that. And secondly, sometimes the cache, just everyone knows the dreaded cache fill up error, where suddenly you're in a live stream and then the ATEM starts flashing and it says cache full, and then your stream chokes and it's gone. Yeah, and there's nobody knows what causes this other than just poor networking code. So I'm really looking to see is the streaming more reliable? Can I trust it? Is the ISO recording more reliable to a CF Express card? Those are the main things. And also the USB webcam out. It'd be nice if they actually improved that and upgraded the chip on that, because the other issue that I have with the ATEMs is that they're using a substandard component in there and it's compressing the video, whereas a lot of the Roland switchers use uncompressed video as their USB webcam out. So the picture quality and the color accuracy on a Roland is way better than the ATEM. So if they've addressed all three of those, hands down, take my money.
Yeah, and the crushed blacks issue, nobody will know until they get one of these in their hands and check it out. I have a feeling that was a pretty deep embedded issue within the older ATEM that we're all using now. And it was at the point where Zoom actually stepped in and put compensation for that into the Zoom client. So, we're not being crushed right now on our image because Zoom fixed it. Not Blackmagic, but Zoom did it. So that's kind of interesting how that goes. And all those things I say yes, yes, and yes to, there's some smart people, and at Blackmagic, they've got rooms full of engineers and software designers. They can look into all these things. And putting the CF cards in there is just automatically going to eliminate any bottlenecks as far as transfer speeds. And the fact that Thunderbolt
It's a nice car.
There's this Thunderbird in the back of it. Thunderbolt on the back of it means that it's going to have a bigger communication pipeline into your computer, whatever you have running it. So maybe you're going to take the job of encoding off of the ATEM and do it inside some type of hardware or computer, like a new Studio M4 from Apple. All those things we don't know. We're just guessing. From what it appears to be, but it's the little things like the buttons and removing all those, the forest of buttons that I have on my unit. I mean, I'm looking down at it. There's going to be 100 buttons on there. You don't need all that. Having a rotary encoder makes a lot more sense. Depending more on the software that drives the ATEM makes a lot more sense. The integration between the two. I like the idea that DaVinci. I think it's up to version 20. They just announced a new version of that. It integrates very well with the new ATEM. So you can tag an ATEM with a DaVinci, and you could be doing replays on sports programs, instant replays. You could be playing the stingers and the bumpers from and through DaVinci, all with the alpha channel, by the way. Because now that you've got that Thunderbolt on the back of it, you don't need to require that the HDMI from your HyperDeck has to be converted from an SDI into HDMI, and then you got to plug the two HDMI inputs. And now you've lost two inputs on your ATEM in order to show an alpha channel. And oh, by the way, those two boxes that you put the SDI to HDMI converters, they're not always frame accurate, which means that you can have an alpha channel that might be slightly off from the other channel. I mean, it's a problem that I've brought it up with them. They just say, oh, we'll look into that. And it's just like the crushed blacks. I never heard back, which means they can't fix it.
Mitch,
but maybe they did.
Did you see, speaking of DaVinci Resolve 20, did you see all the AI updates and their continued development that they're doing? Because with 19, they introduced the speech to text editing, where you can it indexes the audio, and it'll even separate people out by speaker, which saves me so much time. As someone who makes podcasts, who has to cut short form content from long form content, to be able to jump to that, just type in a few words and find that exact spot in the timeline where that person sent that thing and grab the in and out points and cut that. I mean, all the other stuff that they announced today, which I haven't tested, and I do want to test the beta, but they announced all this additional stuff that they've been working on, like AI multicam and being able to identify speakers and all this stuff. So I'm super excited as somebody who spends a lot of time, and I find this stuff very, very tedious, to anything that can really speed up my workflow. What are your thoughts on some of the AI stuff that they're talking about? Because I know obviously we all wrestle with that as content creators, as editors. Like, are they coming for our jobs? Is it going to take away our jobs? Maybe the technology isn't there yet. But how do you feel about that, Mitch, as somebody who works with video?
Well, first of all, let me put a disclaimer in front of that. I don't use DaVinci for my editing.
Yeah, but they're all getting these features.
But let me get to it. I had to put my disclaimer in there. It's all about features, and the big feature now is anything that AI can do to make your job easier. I think DaVinci has won the war of features. I think they've beat everybody. They've beaten Avid. They've beaten what is it? The stupid Apple editing system, Final Cut. They've beaten Adobe Premiere. They've beaten them all on features. They're all trying to do catch up. But you got to remember, Blackmagic has the vast resources of software engineers to do all of these things. And now that they got their software integrated with their hardware, that's a very significant move in the right direction. So I would say, not knowing diddly squat about DaVinci, everything that I've seen, in the public airwaves and otherwise, says that DaVinci's won the war there. I use Adobe Premiere. Adobe has its own little new set of AI enhancements. One of them is that now you can take a clip, and if it's not long enough to fit in that spot, you can generatively, in Premiere, extend that clip with AI to fit that space. You used to have to just slow things down to be able to make that happen. Can't do that, or you don't need to do that anymore. AI will do that. AI now works with the audio to clean up the audio or extend let's say you've got nat sound in the background. When you're extending that video clip to fit that space that you have on your timeline, you can actually let AI extend that background sound. It won't do it with dialogue. It might re-sequence the dialogue for timing. But everybody is in the business of AI now. I don't care who you are. Everybody. Maybe Avid isn't chasing it quite as much because they've got all the Hollywood filmmakers and documentarians, and they're not fighting that battle. But you can be damn sure that DaVinci is leading the pack on the battles, and with 20, it probably has more stuff that can do. But it's all about the integration. I think that's pretty serious. Now, Adobe doesn't make hardware devices, so there's no need to have that kind of integration. But I think Blackmagic wants to be able to say, hey, you use us for a switcher, use us for getting ISOs. Even now you can drop all your ISOs onto a DaVinci timeline, and it separates them out on the timeline so that they're there, so you can go and tweak it. Like if we did the show on DaVinci and posted it, you could drop the ISOs onto a timeline, and if you switched to me too early or something happened and I blanked out, you could cut that out with the ISO, and you could write just on the timeline and fix it all up. So, Alex, I don't know if I answered your question. I first started it by saying I don't know DaVinci, but I know that they're winning the battle. I mean, I can just look at it, and my brain is just so old now. I don't have the bandwidth to learn still another
I don't blame
editing
you.
system.
If you're comfortable, I don't blame you, Mitch. I mean, if you're comfortable or you're using, I'm very much like this. I find it with Avid Pro Tools because I've been using it for 25 years. So for me to switch now to another digital audio workstation, look, I'm trying to spend time to stay up to date with what is happening with all the different DAWs because I have to sell them. I have to support people with them. So I need to know a little bit about Ableton. I need to know a little bit about
support
Cubase.
Logic?
I have to
in addition to
support
Pro
all of them,
Tools?
so I have to spend a little bit of time, but
How
it's
about
muscle
Cakewalk? Do you
memory.
go to Cakewalk?
Well, Adobe Audition. I've used Adobe Audition pretty extensively.
Yeah, I do too.
So
A lot of broadcast people use
it's very
Audition or Odyssey. What was it? The Red Rover. I used to have a little doohickey that was like the standard. Mark, when you're doing audio editing of your shows, what's your preferred software for editing for radio?
For radio,
For radio,
it seems like everyone has their own personal preference. So some people will use Adobe's products. Some people use the products that are online and available for free. It's just kind of what they've been using for years.
okay. So it may not
And
be
we don't really care. We just want the output to be the
right.
same.
Well, a lot of stations, especially the conglomerates out there like iHeart, if you get a job there, then they're going to insist that you know Adobe Audition, for example. And again, I'm not specifically here stumping for the folks at Adobe, but I use Premiere because that's the one I'm using today, and I like it because it's integrated into Illustrator and Photoshop and After Effects through Mogurt and all the other essential graphics that they offer. There's a lot of integration between all their products, and they just improved After Effects, which is my baby. I've been using it forever. It's like the son I had that I'm still hanging out there with. It's more 3D oriented. And in the world of 3D, things are changing too. I mean, Cinema 4D was always the broadcast standard for designing sports graphics and things like that. I'm seeing a shift to Blender, which is an open source freebie program out there. So if you're, pardon me, if you're just getting out of high school or college, make sure you learn both of them. If you have the opportunity, the Maxon products is a good move, but you don't have to shell out the big bucks to get Cinema 4D. You could learn Blender, and you could still just be just as satisfactory out there in the world of 3D graphics. So all of this stuff, it's very interesting, Alex. I see AI integration at NAB. I see more connections between the software and their hardware products. Certainly, Adobe can't manage that particular battle because they're not in the hardware business, but they got a solid system in there. And if you're saying, hey, Mitch, it's real quaint, you use Adobe Premiere. I mean, I didn't start out using Adobe Premiere. When I first looked at Adobe Premiere, it was just kind of, that's kind of clunky software. And, I went over to using Avid, and then I found out Avid is super expensive. And then I went to Media 100, which you may have remember that name from ages ago. It was like a poor man's Avid. And then I came back to Avid. And then I started using, what did I start? There's a bunch of them out there. And I just realized I'm just chasing something here. Oh, Final Cut. I was like totally into Final Cut. So I'm going to throw myself into Final Cut. And I was a huge Final Cut fan because it was a professional editing system. And then version 7 came along and Apple dropped it. They had their reasons for doing it. It wasn't for professionals. It was for the average person out there. And, Apple was smart to say Final Cut should be a product that we sell to everybody, not just to professionals. So that was, I stubbed my toe on that one. And I'm not going back to Apple, for that. Maybe Motion, I'll dabble with a little bit. I like Motion. It's a great bargain. I think Alex Lindsay has said many times, it's the best deal going for $50. Tariff or no tariff, and it's a way to go. So I don't know if they made any. Apple was conspicuous of their absence at NAB. They used to have a big booth there. They spent millions of dollars, and then all of a sudden, Apple got out of the business of showing up at NAB.
I don't think they need it.
Since I took us off subject here, what other stuff from Blackmagic became available? Since we're most interested in that.
They had so many different hardware products, and unfortunately, I don't have the list because I don't really care about any of them. But I think they have a whole bunch of little boxes. I don't know. The ATEM Mini Extreme ISO is the only thing that I really care about. Maybe Mark has some of them. But one thing I wanted to talk about, and this is on the subject of Blackmagic, is something that came up recently in the last few days. We were talking about this. It's very interesting depending on what locale you're in and looking at what type of gear gets used in production. So clearly, Blackmagic has a huge customer base, but depending on what part of the country or where on the continent you are, if you're doing corporate AV work like in Canada, I don't really tend to see Blackmagic products, or at least not a lot of Blackmagic products. Very much seems to be dominated by Roland for camera switchers. So it's really interesting that there's people are very divided on using Blackmagic. There are people that feel very strongly that would never ever use a Blackmagic product, and then there are people that are super passionate about Blackmagic, and they both have their pros and cons. Obviously, Roland is at a much higher price point, and that's clearly how Blackmagic has really disrupted the industry, right? Is by undercutting everybody, coming out with products that have features that people want that were never previously attainable. So, and I just wanted to kind of go around the table here and talk a little bit about their business strategy, kind of disrupting the incumbents and seeing, what do you guys see? Do you see a lot of Blackmagic products? Do you guys use a lot of Blackmagic products yourselves, or, for the type of productions? I mean, Mark, what about you? With what you do with your radio stations, with your camera stuff, are you using any Roland products or?
Well, no, we're not using any Roland products. I mean, I think you have to back up a little bit. I think when Grant got into this, he did he purchase Blackmagic? I'm not sure of the history, but I think somewhere I read or heard that he came in and purchased the company and then started to acquire other companies to bring them into the fold of Blackmagic Design. And so he's been able to really, you can tell he has a passion for doing this, and he's really interested in becoming the front runner product to choose from. I think
Mark, to answer your question, they have acquired, just like Microsoft did, products out there like DaVinci. DaVinci used to make a flying spot camera.
Fairlight too.
Transfer.
Fairlight
was an audio company. Ultimat was a keying company. He's been buying them all up.
so. He's been buying
finding a
them,
way to make them cheaper.
buying them all up to make them more affordable for people. And I mean, just look at the A10 Mini. People, came out at a perfect time. It came out when COVID was coming out, and it allowed people who were going to be on Zoom to do much more in a Zoom meeting that they would otherwise be able to do. And so I think if you take a look at it from that perspective, it also allows us with the radio station where we're not, our primary focus is audio. We do video occasionally to try and test those waters and how radio can deal with, make better of
Right.
video. And so we're buying Blackmagic because it very simply allows us to have affordable equipment, and we can
Yeah.
also control the cameras. So when we hook up our ATEM switchers or our constellations, and we don't need to have somebody standing in front of every camera, we can just use through the remote controls of the software, control, the contrast, the shading, whatever. And that just saves us money in the long run because we're not staffing, 3 or 4 or 5 cameras
Yeah.
at some event that we're covering. So for
Yeah.
us, Blackmagic makes sense. But to answer your question, Alex, I don't go around enough to a lot of these events to see what equipment's being used. I do hear that people like Ross and people like other equipment that is perhaps has a reputation of being more stable in a production environment.
Yeah, and
Yeah, it's let's face it, it's the entry level for a lot of people. And I've been in the pro video business for ages. And in the beginning, we kind of laughed at Blackmagic. We still do in some respects. If you got a big Ross switcher, that switcher, if you're buying a pro switcher out there that you expect to work all the time perfectly for a production or for a broadcast, if it's a Super Bowl or whatever, you're not going to use a Blackmagic switcher for that job. Because the objective is not to buy the cheapest switcher out there. Your objective is to buy the most reliable one. So if I'm a radio station that's dabbling in video, I could see why you go into a Blackmagic because they made it available to folks to be able to try something with a switcher or another device of some kind that they wouldn't otherwise have to do. Because remember, in the older days, or in the broadcast world, if you go to the top of the food chain, so to speak, the issue is that this stuff is bespoke. In other words, you buy a specific device as a switcher. You buy a specific device to do Chiron graphics. You buy a specific, and you spend millions of dollars. So I think it was smart of the folks at Blackmagic to step in and get these entry-level devices that they look pretty darn good. But I wouldn't trust it in a multi-million-dollar program or a show or something like that. So you can step in there. Yeah, there's a lot of other better ones. You know, the Ross switchers, the Roland switchers. I mean, Alex, you actually talked about this last week when we were talking about entry-level products and how do they get introduced and how do people adopt them. I think you already hit the nail on the head when you were talking about how these things were introduced and how they compete with the big stuff. I think that there are more people out there more likely to use a Blackmagic device than there is for a big-time Sony switcher or Ross switcher. It's just the nature of the beast.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more with all your points there, Mitch. And I think, look, Blackmagic has really found a spot in the industry where it not only makes these products attainable for people that couldn't actually access this gear, like you said, but also it's found its way into a lot of productions, and like you said, maybe not multi-million-dollar productions, but in a lot of productions, it's really changed the whole industry. And it sounds to me like, based on what Mark was saying for the work that he does with his radio stations, I mean, Mark, if you try to reproduce what you're doing now with, say, Sony cameras, PTZ cameras, Roland or Ross switchers, I mean, let's face it, your budget would probably have to triple, right? You probably wouldn't be. I mean, is that a fair statement? Would you be able to do what you're doing now?
Well, I think part of the issue with changing cameras is you then have to change lenses a lot of times. And so we have a couple of the larger Blackmagic cameras that take Canon glass. So now we'd have to go out and get, if we switched over to Sony, we'd have to get Sony glass. Some of our smaller studio cameras, we're using Panasonic Micro Four Thirds lenses on them. So we would then have to switch to, whatever lens would have to work on whatever type of, frame we had. If it's full frame, is it Micro Four Thirds, whatever. So whatever the sensor is, you got to match the glass to. So I don't know that I've answered your question, but in our particular case, obviously, of all the cameras that I think is out there that's worthwhile are the Sony cameras that are because of the autofocus is so clear, and then the PTZ Sony camera with the full frame is a very nice camera, but I don't know that a radio station can afford.
Well, yeah,
what is it,
'cause we're
about
talking-
$12,000 for the
And
lens
Mark,
and the
with
body?
respect to you, you're a radio operator and you're very sensitive to the investment you're making on it. If your main business was doing video, which it isn't, you would concentrate on higher end devices. Although you're stepping out with your Sony FX3 there, I congratulate you for doing that, because now you get those Sony E-mount lenses, which is so beautiful, especially with that autofocus stuff going on. But if you were in the business of doing high-end video production, that was your main business, you would. I can tell you that I know people in the business because I'm there. We kind of laugh at the Blackmagic stuff.
No.
with all due respect.
And I don't disagree with you at all. I mean, we're even looking at the radio station of possibly going to FX6s. And the only reason I have an
Good choice.
FX3, yeah, and the only reason I have an FX3 here is because I'm also using this in conference calls all day long for architecture and engineering, where I'm the president of this company, and I have to send a message that is one of professionalism, and I can't be on a little camera that's out of focus and such.
Right,
And
right.
even when I had the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera that we all used to have at one time or another, is a great camera, but it wasn't great for me because you always had to shade it and color it, and
Sure.
I didn't have time to do that all the time. So
Did
the Sony,
Sony's
Sony's been running for a year and a half. I've never turned it off.
Well,
And
don't do that.
And it's always in focus, and it's very reliable for someone like me who would have to take the whole shelving system down to get to the back of it, and turn it on or off.
I've had mine for 5 years, but I don't want to brag about it. Yeah, Sony would be a step up, but I think it's all it's a business proposition. I'm sure that Grant over at Blackmagic Design to answer your original question, Alex, has a very distinct plan of where he's going to go. They want to control the entire ecosystem, and as you can see from their product line, they have the software, they have the hardware, they do have higher end TV type productions. They just announced, Mark's got it up on his screen there, a new Pixis 12K camera. I wouldn't buy one for a professional shoot. If I did a high-end video shoot, I would use like a Sony Venice or an Arriflex, or Arri, I'm showing my age, Arriflex, or something like that. But there's other stuff that was NAB. Alex, why don't you keep us moving with any of the other Blackmagic announcements? Mark is scrolling through a lot of tasty stuff. There's a new hyperdeck out, which is kind of cool too.
There is a new tasty hyperdeck out.
Yeah, this deck link thing, 100G. That's amazing. The deck link card.
That's pretty serious high-end stuff.
Well, that's for their 2110 connectivity, which is
right. And I think that's
next...
another story here that we've overlooked is how much of their equipment are they revamping to go from SDI or HDMI to 2110?
Well, it's clearly
they've done it on the new A10 by having a 10G Ethernet port on the back of it. That it's not used for that specifically, but I bet you a firmware update will make that happen real soon. Yeah,
I just want to quickly go to just a quick chat in the or a comment in the chat here. We've got who do we got here? We got Ivy from Lumira USA saying, where is it here? About products. What would each of you buy at NAB today? So we've talked about the ATEM switcher, but I'm curious, what else? Is there anything else that you guys have seen, Blackmagic or not? Anything that that you would buy right now if someone just gave you unlimited budget? What would you buy? Anything that piques your interest?
The new ATEM. If I had to buy one, I'd be in the market for that. I think that would be a good voice. I don't have a ton of money. I suffer from that Italian disease. My funds are low, and I just don't have the ability to invest in it. And the other thing is my use. I use it for my Zoom room. I'm not using it to produce big video productions like Alex Lindsay does, and I'd be very, very careful about using it for a very high end. If you spent you had a $50,000 or $100,000 virtual event, I'm not sure that I'd be putting Blackmagic equipment on the other side of that. But for my own use, where if something failed and I went to black for a second, that's no big deal. I went to black for a second. It's prosumer stuff, so I'm okay with that.
And Mark, what about you? Would you buy this ATEM? You use ATEM switchers. Would you buy this?
We use ATEM switchers, but after today's discussion, man, I'm going to look at the Rolands or the Rosses if I'm going to buy something new.
You should.
No, but seriously, I would look if somebody said, "Here's a credit card, go get what you want." I would start to utilize I would start at the cameras and the microphones. And I would build up something. Right now, I would look at the FR7s and a bunch of glass for them, because when we do things, they're community-based things. So they would be like town halls. We could have 5 or 6 of those FR7s around and control them from one control place, and with a Sony controller rather than the Blackmagic design.
Yeah,
controller.
That's the irony of the whole thing, is having. They just built, by the way, one of the new things they just announced is a mini controller, like the mini controller for the ATEM. They've got one now that will shade the cameras. It's pretty sophisticated. Only works with a Blackmagic camera.
Right.
So, if somebody told me that they have a new entertainment center, but it only works in a Hyundai, I'd say, great, enjoy it. But I don't like driving a Hyundai.
The other thing that we didn't talk about.
It's good for you.
The real sleeper hit. Did anyone see that new beta firmware for the Blackmagic 6K cameras that does autofocus and face tracking? That's a big deal. That threw me off when I saw that announcement.
Well, they got to do something about that. In fact, all the camera manufacturers are playing catch up with Sony. Nobody does it better than Sony as far as autofocus is concerned. So they can say they have it. The question is, do they actually do it?
That's a good slogan. Nobody does it better.
Nobody does it. That was Carly Simon. By the way, I got a gold record for that. It was a theme from The Spy Who Loved Me. Anyone? Bueller?
Audio processing. Did anyone see any audio processing announcements there? There's probably something, but I'm looking at the list of stuff. There's just way too much. We don't even have time to get through every single NAB product announcement. So
It's also early. It's
Yeah.
early. I mean, today's the first day, and there's people scrambling around the event right now. In fact, we've got a couple of friends that are there right now, and if they manage to get a signal out, they're going to report in while the show's going on. But I doubt we're going to hear from them because everybody's using their phone in there. John Idelson is nice enough to give us the word, and I did ask some other folks. But audio-related stuff, interesting concept because the big announcements in the audio world. Let's take mic processors for a suggestion. You can kind of split that between professional high-end stuff like NAB, solid-state logic, and things like that. A lot of that stuff is still analog and digitally controlled. It's not all digital. They're kind of making that move. But if you talk to an engineer, I was watching Rick Beato talking to some famous Bob Clearmountain, famous studio engineer. He's got solid-state logic and API boards, but he's using Apogee converters on it. So he's taking an analog board. Was that an exasperation breath there?
Sorry,
Alex?
I had my mic.
No, that was okay. I thought maybe you were trying to tell me something. It's like, it seems like the old stuff is still what is being, it's like the latest and greatest mic processor is not where they're going with that. It has to have some legacy associated with it. So that's why the NABs are working.
Yeah, the whole radio industry, though, the broadcast industry, quite a few years ago, moved to. It's been a while. It's not a new thing for them to have digitally controlled anything. Like a lot of radio stations have been gutting their gear, replacing it with digital, because I mean, there's just too many advantages. I would not look. I love gear, analog gear, and I still have a few choice pieces, and I will probably always have analog processors and dynamics processors and preamps and all that kind of thing. But the reality is that especially in the world of broadcast, there's just way too many advantages for digital to be able to store presets, to be able to recall. Every guest could have their own preset, and you can tweak them and be able to have presets for specific shows. And you could reconfigure your whole radio station at the click of a button, a little macro button that totally changes all that sort of stuff. Mark is saying absolutely not.
You can do that.
I'm not saying absolutely not, but I think Mitch will back me up here. Most stations don't have a full-time engineer anymore. So the engineer wouldn't be anywhere near to fix something when it's broken. So
the other thing is radio stations don't have deep pockets, and Mark will definitely confirm this.
Yeah, I mean, we're still using a board that we bought used 12 years ago.
There's only room for about 3 or 4 console manufacturers that'll do the job, and that'd be Wheatstone or Lalo and Axia, which is part of the TELUS group, friend of show, Frank Foti. And they all have their own proprietary networking protocol. Yeah, they're using IP technology, but they're not selling these things on the basis of bells and whistles and lights and blinkies and stuff like that. They're selling on something that you can buy at a radio station. And Mark, please comment here. And you're going to be using it for 10 years. You
10
can't
years,
afford to buy
20
something
or
that's
30 years.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, it's the change in the industry has been slow because the budgets aren't there at radio stations to go out and spend $100,000 on what it would cost you to go digital. Because you're going to need a new board, you're going to need all new amenities, you're going to need to gut your existing facility, which means you're going to have to go off air. You're going to have engineers come in and rewire everything. And yes, you may need fewer wires now, but you've got to go track what all those 50 years of wires went to and hope so you don't cut the wrong one. So
a lot of those upgrades involve pulling miles of wire out of your studio because all it takes now is an Ethernet connection to connect one studio to the other. Right. And all these boards that are happening now in the radio station are one input works with all the inputs on all the consoles. So I guess to get to the NAB focus on this, there's a very limited world in the broadcast radio area where they're interested in new stuff. And it might be 4 or 5 console manufacturers. Nobody stepped in and done something amazing like Blackmagic, except I notice our friend Catfish over at Angry Audio, has come out with a console for like $1,200. And for a console that works in a radio station for $1,200 is major league news, because typically they cost at least $10,000 or $100,000. So maybe he's trying to play the Blackmagic game by offering something like that. Maybe Shure is going to do that with some of their microphones.
Maybe.
Those are the kind of things that you see at a show and you go, oh, that's interesting. I can get a board now in my production room for $2,000.
Plus, Mitch, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a different sound to analog that is more warm than the sound you get from digital. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I think Alex should answer that, but I would say I don't think they care. I think if it squawks and puts something out, then that's good enough. You know, you're not in a position in a radio station to worry about, well, this sounds a little better than this one, but this one's $10,000 cheaper. I'm going with the $10,000 cheaper one. Alex?
Their analog definitely has a sound to it. Absolutely. And, you know, it's interesting because obviously even digital consoles still have analog circuitry. The preamps are analog, but they have to be converted to digital. And what I find is that when I'm doing sound, you can ask any engineer this, when I am doing my gain structure, we calibrate things differently on analog versus digital. And analog is a lot more forgiving when you push it harder upwards of its limits, whereas digital sounds really, really nasty. So you really have to be careful. They're two very different worlds. By the way, I just want to step back slightly. We are talking about gear, but I just wanted to bring in someone in the chat, I Am Fatness, because we were talking about cameras, and he's saying the Sony FR7s are great for studio, but not as flexible. I'm curious why you say that, because I know the FR7, which is a full frame camera, which is the same as the FX3. I know the other than the PTZ aspect, I think they have SDI on it too. But I'm curious what he means by it is not as flexible in comparison to what. So maybe
you can't use it as your main camera very easily. Look, there's no one size fits all. If I was using an FR7, I'd have that towards the back of the room, so it's got to look at everything. And I might use, like Mark was suggesting, an FX6 as your primary camera on the main talent, and I might throw a couple FX3s in there. Here's the thing: FX3s and FX6, the sensors are very similar. The same thing with the 7. You don't want to necessarily have FX7s everywhere. So It may not be a good application of a great piece of technology. FX7s are great cameras. FX3 is a nice entry-level camera. All-around size and what it does, FX6, I think that's a sweet spot for anybody that's doing virtual events and things like that. They're not going out there with Steadicams and Aries and Sony Venices. That would just be crazy. And if I had that kind of budget, I'd be doing crazy stuff like that too.
So
Thanks,
he just
Matt. Appreciate that.
And a follow-up comment.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, he's also saying that there's only a 200 millimeter reach with that camera.
He's being sarcastic.
I don't know if he's.
I don't think so. He's saying you can't put it in the back of the room with the sensor that it has, the FR7 has, with a 200 millimeter lens, I guess.
Midway back. Let's say it's not a giant hole. Can't be.
So what would you? Okay. All right. So
how big is the room? Is it a hallway?
I don't know. And the other, I don't. Okay. I'm not familiar.
You
with
stumped
Canon's,
us. All right, you stumped us.
I'm not familiar with Canon's CRN 500. Does it have a different sensor? So that means it can be use different lenses.
Definitely going to be.
I wouldn't mix manufacturers, because then
no, neither would I. So you'd have to go all Canon
or all Sony, depending. Hey, look.
Right.
That's not my main area. I can guess, but then guessing leads to bad information. I'm not going to give bad information. If I was going to cover an event, an FX6 and a couple of FX3s would be fine. And if you wanted to get bird's eye shots or be able to control it, and you only got one or two people pushing the buttons, I could see where the FR7 would make sense to do that. But what else we got, Alex?
Well, do you guys want to wrap NAB and talk about? We did have some other things on the list here. We could, if you want to keep the show going for a bit. We've
Well,
got
I'd love to have people that are on chat to give us a heads up because we're sitting here in a room doing a talk show, and while we're doing this, all kinds of things are happening back in Las Vegas. So if anybody has information, pop it up on YouTube chat and let us know. And it can be just a name. Sony just announced this, or so and so has this, or some small vendor in a small corner of the NAB. We could talk about the NAB experience a little bit. Mark has been there. You could tell us a little bit what it was like.
Well,
Mark,
before
what do
we
you
do,
expect?
before we go into the NAB experience, I Am Fatness says that the Canon has a 1-inch sensor and a 20x zoom. So that answers the question I had. To move on to NAB and what it's like, from what I've heard, and I did not go this year, obviously, because I'm here. The center hall has been closed for upgrades. And so there's the South Hall and the North Hall, maybe if I remember correctly. And so that means you're doing a lot of walking. And I know that
Wow.
there's quite a distance between these halls because they're enormous, and it's not unheard of to put 20,000 steps on your iPhone or watch or whatever you use to count your steps if you count them. And so there is a lot of walking around. The amount of money that these companies spend on these booths is phenomenal. And some of these booths, you think of a booth at a typical industry show, and it might be 20 by 10 or 20 by 20 or even as small as 10 by 10. And yet, what did I heard somebody say today that the Blackmagic was the whole South Hall or something of that extent? Some of the larger companies that are very competitive have enormous booths. I know Ross last year had a really large booth, and Blackmagic had a large booth. And so it's there's just everything there. Lots of salespeople meeting and talking with people. I'm sure there's meeting rooms where the large buyers go and have conversations about what they're going to purchase over the next year and try and get different deals.
Yeah, it makes sense to make deals at the event. As Mark says, it's a walking challenge. There's so many sites that within 30 minutes, your brain is turned to mush. And if you didn't have a game plan before you came in there where you want to go, you're going to get lost. You're going to walk down one hallway and go into another, and it's just going to turn you into a crazy hombre wandering the halls with big giant white eyes and a little pupil. It's just crazy how that works. It truly is a bunch of eye candy. And if you stand in a corner of one of the big halls and you look up there, the big exhibitors you can see, like the Sonys and the Everetts or Ross or whoever, you're going to see them from quite a bit away, and they spend millions of dollars. But I think those days are kind of not gone, but I think they're being more and more careful because they just don't have that kind of money, and they also don't have that big in an audience to do it. The sweet spot seems to be what Blackmagic is doing, which gets us all the way back to what Alex originally talked about on last week's show, that the prosumer line is where the money is. And even Sony is making prosumer cameras now, like the ZV-10, the FX3, the FX30, which is half the price of the FX3. There may be an FX4 on the show that they've announced. I don't know right now. So those are the kind of things I'd be on the lookout for. But I don't know how many of us, us on the panel and people watching, have deep enough pockets that can go out there and drop $100,000 on a new switcher or a new camera, a new lens.
Not many. But I got to say, though, we do truly live in incredible times. Like, honestly, I don't think I would want to be alive in any other decade other than now, because there is so much cool tech and things are advancing at such a rapid pace. And to your point, Mitch, to see this progression every year at these, shows like NAB, where you see a lot of the R&D that's being put into this higher end stuff, some of that technology trickles down. You see this across a lot of industries where it trickles down into prosumer level, gear, and then regular people can have this. What Blackmagic has done to democratize video production, to make it attainable to podcasters and YouTubers, and to really just generally bring the general overall quality of all of our shows up a huge amount. I mean, it's really incredible to see what's happening right now. So I feel grateful.
Yeah, I would make an analogous to being a young man looking at your first Playboy magazine, and there's nothing in there that you're ever going to see in person or have the opportunity. There's the Mark look I'm getting. That you're never ever going to see that in real life. It's just not realistic. So you like to go to see that's out there at NAB, but there's a very good chance that you're never going to be able to afford it, or it's not going to be in your league to be able to have that new console of the month with the staple through the middle of it. By the way, Playboy doesn't print anymore, so it's just
okay.
a fun anecdote now.
I faded you out a while ago, so it's okay.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. It's a fair analogy, so what can you say? So, we just talked about a very tiny, small part of what's going on at NAB right now. A lot of things are out there, a lot of things yet to be discovered. I would have loved to have known what people were looking for. Like, it's sometimes easier to say, what are you looking for? I mean, what are you looking at the NAB announcements? You don't necessarily have to go there. Maybe you can cover a lot more ground by getting an exhibit chart and saying, let me go to their website, or somebody like at office hours. I think Alex Lindsay's out there with a camera wandering the floor right now. He's liable to see and uncover some very interesting stuff. I think the last coverage I saw was Guy Cochran was walking around the booths with a camera. He's doing a wonderful job of talking to, because he knows the business. He understands what would work and what doesn't work, because he's into the hardware. So that's the kind of interaction I'd love to see people doing. And of course, Alex is really smart about that. So we're probably going to know more next week on next week's shows, and maybe we should continue this conversation about what was at NAB that should affect most of us. You can't say NAB and how it affects everybody, because that covers a lot of ground now. It used to be just TV stations and radio stations, and maybe a little film. You go to Cinegear. What's the show that they do in LA?
Yeah,
that's the one you want to go to if you're a cinematographer and you're looking at expensive Arri cameras or lighting rigs and sound stuff. But NAB is a little bit different. And then there's the NAB on the the East Coast, which kind of merged with AES, which is the Audio Engineering Society. That might be an interesting one to cover because it's smaller and it's at the Javits Center. Maybe that'd be interesting to get. And meanwhile, I'm going to invite as many people to watch this show to send your comments in via Mukana and Discord as to what you've seen that are really interesting. I don't care how big it is or how expensive it is or how inexpensive it is, or the stuff that we didn't have time to talk about that's even at Blackmagic. We could do 2 shows on what Blackmagic announced: cameras, mixers and switchers, and TV studio setups, and their cinema scanner. I think Mark and I were talking about, they've got a scanner now that's specially done for 8mm and 16mm film. How much of that's sitting on a shelf somewhere that somebody wants to transfer? Well, if you've got $35,000, you can buy one of these. They're really cool. And it goes back to the old Da Vinci cinema scanners that used to be out there. I remember they were an individual company that got bought by Blackmagic Designs. So it's a very interesting thing. Anybody else want to jump in? Have any wrap-up comments about NAB?
I don't have anything other than the fact that I'm utterly overwhelmed by everything. So I'm still sort of processing. Sure. And like you said, Mitch, we'll have follow-ups. We'll talk about this in the coming weeks, because I think because the show is happening right now, I think it's going to take us about a week or so to kind of digest everything that's coming out of there. We decided to laser focus on very specific, like mostly Blackmagic, and there's obviously so many incredible vendors there. So we'll have more to say, I think, next week.
Yeah, that's a good point to make. And we're not a big operation. We don't have hundreds of employees or volunteers. Otherwise, we'd be at the show, walking the floor and announcing and showing and touching and feeling. But there is something about being at NAB. I've been there a bunch of times, and as Mark says, it is a challenge to your feet. and the quality of life as you go through it. I think they actually pump something into the air to make you last a little bit longer. Maybe they're pumping oxygen into the air. I know one thing they don't pump in there is wireless connectivity, because we had a couple of people that were going to call us from the floor that haven't been able to get in, and that's because there probably is no coverage inside. Everybody's got a phone. So thank you very much for your input. We might extend the conversation a little bit into our next week's show. David McKenzie from WVUD, who's the chief engineer, has asked to be on the show, and we're going to have him come on in and talk about broadcast microphones, which is a great subject for all of us, because it's not all microphones everywhere that are used in recording studios. It's the ones we use for our voices. And it's a reasonable subject to discuss, don't you think, Alex? Of the various mics that are in use and have been in use for us to converse about with somebody who knows.
Absolutely. I'm super excited about that. And you know, and a lot of the people that listen to the show know that I'm a huge mic nerd. So I'm always happy to talk about anything audio related, microphones and all that sort of stuff. So I'm looking forward to it.
Nerds! And he is. He truly is. And he's got his 414. It's a proud papa, and his RE20.
Vintage.
And Mark over there with his 27. And we'll talk about how we got there, because that's kind of like but you know what's interesting is that there hasn't been like a huge sea change in microphones, other than the fact that there seems to be a ton of no-name condenser type microphones flooding the market at super cheap prices. And I just want to tell you, like everything on eBay, if it's too cheap, it's probably a reason that it's too cheap. So don't go out and buy everything, because $1 is too much to spend if it doesn't work well for you. So I think it's a cool thing to talk about. We're going to do that next week, and we're lining up some guests of I can't tell you, but I can hint at it that you will be very impressed. I did get turned down by the grease man. He did say that his handlers said he's way too busy enjoying retirement and floating around on the good ship Grease. So I'm going to bump in him at Schaefer's Canal House and give him a piece of my mind, because I'd love to have somebody that was there right at the time that Howard Stern was there, and they really competed head to head. And frankly, I like Grease better, but that's it. So, Alex, how do people reach out to us in the week till we come back on again?
Well, Mitch, there are multiple ways that people can reach out to us. So we have our community, so you can go to Discord. If you are not part of that community, just scan that QR code. I will leave it up on the screen for a few seconds. That's basically the place where we get to hang out and talk about the show. We can talk about various different topics. It doesn't have to be about The Last Angry DJ. It could be about movies and TV shows and the broadcast industry and podcasts and whatever else you want to talk about. That's a good place to hang out. Of course, you can also reach out to us on social media. So if you aren't following us on X, we are at The Last Angry DJ there. We're also on Facebook, pretty much everywhere under the same name. Of course, you can also send us an email the old-fashioned way to hello@thelastangrydj.com. And of course, if you'd like to show your support for this show, there are multiple ways you can do that. You can like and subscribe to this show on YouTube. You can find it as a podcast in whatever podcast app you'd like to use. We're pretty much available everywhere on Apple's podcast platform, TuneIn and Stitcher, Google, Amazon Alexa, Pandora. We're on iHeartRadio, I believe now. So we're pretty much available everywhere. You can also show your support by going to patreon.com/The Last Angry DJ. That's patreon.com/The Last Angry DJ, and become a coffee supporter at $2 a month, and that will help us out immensely. Of course, I also want to thank the folks at Boink Software, Oliver Breidenbach specifically, for being instrumental in helping us produce this show with Mimo Live, which is the application that we're using to live stream and cut this show and put all the graphics packages together. So thank you to Boink Software for Mimo Live, and of course to Mark Giuliani, of course, who's an incredible part of the team. I'm going to go to you, Mark, because your breadth and depth of your knowledge in the industry, you always add a unique flair to the show. So it's good to have you on.
Thank you.
Mark, is anything burning a hole in your wallet right now that you've seen?
2 radio stations and tower maintenance. Yeah, that's pretty much burning a hole in my pocket.
All right, pals. Good to have you here. Thank you. Any closing comments about NAB? Are you happy you're there or not there?
You know,
I'm
I want to go at some point. The only reason why I'm not traveling right now is for the reason that you probably already know about, because of tensions between Canada and the United States right now. So that's the only reason why I'm not traveling. But look, the moment that kind of settles down, I would love to do some traveling. I'd love to meet up with you guys in person. We've never met other than just being on Zoom. I'd love to go someday, for sure.
Sounds good. Mark?
Yeah, I'd love to go. But, you know, I have shows to do like this one right here. So I need to be here rather than spending money at NAB.
Can you get another video or thing like this, except you and I and Alex at NAB, and you can put me in a wheelchair, because that's literally where I'd be after 5 hours on the floor. All right. Thank you, guys. And thank you all for being patient with our NAB coverage. It's more of an opinion than anything else. And congratulations to Blackmagic for having very viable products that people need out there. And I think we will continue this conversation into next week's show. So thank you all. Get your comments and questions in there for next week. We appreciate it. In the meantime, be safe.
Swagger down the street with your red lips and funky beat. You better hold your head up to the sky. I'm gonna roll with you till the day I die.